This morning. I am joined by my friends and brothers Gil Cedillo and Marquise Harris Dawson. We expect Mr. Koretz a little later, it's my understanding, but we have a quorum so we can get started. Mr. Clerk, why don't you just quickly go through what we have on today's agenda?
We have two items on the agenda. Item number one is a motion from council members Wesson and Harris Dawson relative to a presentation on the review of national best practices report issued by the Inspector General on May 2nd, 2017. And item number two is a report from the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to the Los Angeles Police Department's border rights hearings, hearing examiners, and liability and legal issues.
Thank you so very much. Do you have cards? Do we have cards?
Yes, we do have cards on each item.
I don't know when I'm going to get used to this little computer thingy here. Well, anyway, why don't I start off with public comment. Andrus Kwan, Betsy Blush. Carolina Goodman. If I've called your name, please come up. Eric Previn, Melanie Ochoa. Hi. Identify yourself.
Yes, I'm Carolina Goodman from the League of Women Voters. Good morning, council members.
Good morning.
Thank you for having this meeting about police reform. I'm on a committee for criminal justice reform with the League of Women Voters. So I'm here to talk about item number one and number two. Is this correct? May I do that all together, or should I?
Yes, just keep going.
Good. Item number one has to do with the report from the OIG, and we have had the good luck to speak with our Inspector General as well as Chief Moore, and we are very pleased with the reforms that they are continuing to make in LAPD. I would encourage Chief Moore to be open to looking at the immigration reforms that we mentioned, protecting our communities who are in fear.
Keep going, don't stop.
Okay,
go ahead.
Who are in fear of detention and deportation. Okay, item number two has to do with the disciplinary board. And there are three things we really would like to see. One is to make sure that the citizens that are represented there are true citizens, that they represent a diverse community. The second thing is to make sure that currently we have LAPD representing their case, but we really would like to have someone who is an expert in that area, who can stand up to the lawyers who are opposing them. And okay. I'm sorry, I can't remember number three.
That's fine. That's fine.
But I think my colleague Andres will be able to speak to this. Thank you so
much. Where is Andres?
Right here.
Andres. And let's do 2 minutes. It's going to take at least that. Hi.
I'm Melanie Ochoa with the ACLU. Andres is my colleague also.
I know who you are. Yeah. I was wondering where. We'll get to him next. Yes.
So the City Council sold Charter Amendment C to the public as a way to create meaningful change within the LAPD disciplinary process by increasing police accountability through more civilian involvement. The City Council members who endorsed the PPL-sponsored Charter Amendment C did so despite a report from your own CLA showing that civilian members, as defined and selected by the Police Commission, routinely voted to reduce punishment for officers and are an impediment to police accountability. If the City Council truly wishes to change course and fix the Board of Rights so that it actually helps protect the public from police misconduct, holding an 8:30 a.m. community meeting scheduled on 48 hours notice is not the way to ensure that the public is involved in this process. I hope as future meetings of this committee are held and the City Council moves forward with this, an active effort is made to ensure that the process is transparent and includes the community that is so strongly demanding real accountability. Moving forward with changes to the makeup of the BOR, the City Council must ensure that civilian members on the Board of Rights are real civilians who represent all of Los Angeles. This includes people who have had negative interactions with police, including arrests or filing complaints. If individuals with police friends and family can be trusted to be impartial, so should they. Also, civilians should not be limited to professional mediators, nor should the police commission get complete discretion in how civilians are selected. The City Council must create a transparent and open process for selecting civilians and take that responsibility back from the police commission. Equally important is ensuring that the department is recommended by an actual attorney in Board of Rights hearings. Currently, it is an untrained LAPD officer defending the department's discipline, going against a lawyer paid for by the PPL. Multiple reports and internal LAPD sources have complained that the department's reps are unprepared and outmatched. City Council should create a department advocate position that allows trained attorneys who are not beholden to officers to defend the department's discipline.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, Andres, we were looking for you. Welcome.
Apparently, Council President, Council members, apparently I'm Andres Kwan, the sought-after infamous Andres. Attorney with the ACLU. I will read my comments so I can stick to 2 minutes. I wholeheartedly concur and echo my colleagues' comments. I must also emphasize to you the importance of replacing the civilians currently on the Board of Rights with individuals who reflect the diverse lived experiences of Angelinos, and not merely those who are in line with the LAPD. With real diversity, including diversity of experiences, you would finally create a pool of civilians that was not intent to granting officers leniency, no matter the cost, no matter how egregious their conduct, no matter the erosion of any ounce of trust the Board of Rights may still have. But here's the thing, Mayor Garcetti and some others have already suggested to the media that these civilian spots should be filled with retired cops. That is the worst possible option. It will completely undermine the public's faith that the LAPD disciplinary process can ever be impartial and can actually hold officers accountable when it must. Limiting civilian participants to actual civilians who have no past or current affiliation or financial ties to the department is the only solution. Finally, as the CLA has recommended, the City Council should commit to supporting state legislation that opens public disciplinary records to the public. We recently had a statewide victory with the passage of AB 1421, which requires that certain records of police misconduct be made public. The City Council can and should support this legislation by enacting an ordinance that would make these records now open to the public through a pre-array request, public as a matter of course by publication, rather than requiring every interested person to submit their own PRA request. If the City Council is willing to take that step in support of transparency, there are numerous organizations in the community that would assist with working out details that would make such a project most valuable to the public. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Is there anybody else that I called earlier and maybe they left the room and they've now returned? Anybody else that wanted to speak and maybe didn't hear your name called? If so, come forward. Anybody else? Okay. Let's bring up the representatives from the department. Let's listen to the report, or the city staff. Come on up. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to you all. You want to start?
Absolutely. Good morning to you as well.
Oh, and we have been joined by Mr. Paul Koretz. I had to make that announcement. Everybody needs to know Koretz is in the house, so go ahead.
More important than anything I have to say, good morning, President Chair Wesson and council members, Koretz, Engler, Harris Dawson, and Cedillo. I'm Mark Smith, the Inspector General for Los Angeles Police Department. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you again. We were here, if you recall, in March to discuss the Inspector General's report on LAPD's adherence to some of the principles put out by two seminal reports on policing. The President Obama's 21st Task Force President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, as well as guidelines on use of force put out by PERF, or the Police Executive Research Forum. At the last presentation, I really went through a number of areas that LAPD has been a leader in some of the recommendations put out by those two reports. And then I listed out 7 categories where our office was in particular watching for continued improvement and progress on the part of LAPD. I went through some examples of each of those 7. Last time, I didn't plan on doing so again today, but I thought it might be helpful just to name those 7 areas once more for your familiarity. One is adopting procedural justice as a guiding principle throughout the department, preventing biased policing, establishing a culture of transparency and accountability, collection and reporting of data, the use of force, stops and searches, and community policing. What I hope might be of assistance to you today, and afterwards I certainly will be able to answer any questions, before I even get into the meat of what I'm going to say, I should introduce the folks to my left from the Office of Inspector General, Police Special Investigators Camelia Naguib and Julie Buchwald. And the great reason that they are here with me today is they did the work on this report. It was completed by the last administration in the Inspector General's office, and so the experts are the ones sitting to my left and deserve the credit for the work that's gone into it.
Well, thank you for your work and welcome.
I think the main thing that I was hoping would be helpful for you today is to give just a snapshot of some of the things we've been monitoring and looking at with regard to the department's progress on the recommendations coming out of those 2 reports. We have a lot of positive areas. We have a few areas where we'd like to see continued improvement on the part of the department. Here are some examples. On the concept of implementing procedural justice throughout the department, it takes me no further back than Monday of this week, where I was called to a meeting with the Chief of Staff of the department to discuss this very topic, how to effectively implement procedural justice in all areas of training, policy, procedure for the department. Again, that's one illustrative example, but as an outcome of that meeting, our office has been asked to attend an upcoming command staff training to discuss issues related to procedural justice. And so we're very appreciative to have that opportunity and think it's an effective way for the department to continue being mindful of procedural justice in everything it does. With regard to training as well, the department has made a lot of successful progress as far as developing leadership. Make sure they're not just bringing up good officers, but making good leaders. There are programs such as the Police Sciences and Leadership Series, which we are very in favor of, and our specific recommendation to them was that they ensure to commit the necessary staff and resources to make programs like that a success. We didn't want to see a great idea doomed to failure over time due to lack of care. The department has exercised or expressed a commitment to making sure that those programs remain fully staffed and properly resourced. Another area of success is ongoing implicit bias training and evaluation. In what I still consider to be a bit of a Herculean effort, and this may be well known to you as it's highly publicized, the department undertook a pretty massive effort to train all of its sworn personnel, somewhere getting close to the order of 10,000 people over the course of 1 year in implicit bias training. That was crucial. Our recommendation to them was to make sure this was not a one-time operation. The training needs to be ongoing, and the principles learned in that training need to be infused in future trainings and in future work the department does. And so they've committed to continuing that training or are making efforts to do additional trainings in the very near future. Another area is community participation. The department was advised, and best practice says that community participation in development and delivery of training for officers, where relevant, is crucial. And to me, the theory behind that is an obvious but important one. If a police agency is going to enforce laws in a society, it's important to know how that society wants them to enforce the laws. They are public servants. We're pleased to say the department has embraced this concept through some of the training I mentioned before, that police and sciences leadership, through implicit bias training, and very importantly to me, through its mental health intervention training as well. And I'm going to get to mental health once more in just a moment. Another area of success is implementing AB 953, and as you recall, that's the state legislation requiring data collection on police stops. Our first recommendation coming out of that was to make sure that the department was in compliance and prepared to meet the bounds of that law. It took effect last summer, and the department has has met that first requirement as they must under state law. The second part of it is one that's important to us as well, and that's analyzing the stop data. There's a large new bank of data that will come forth through this legislation. We are interested to see what the department's role is in analyzing that stop data, using it effectively to make sure disparate treatment is rooted out. We're interested in what our role is as well in having access to that new data. And so it's all pretty new within just the last few months, but the department is creating a working group, as far as we understand, to make sure that they are mindful of how to use that data effectively. And the last area I wanted to just highlight of success is educating families of persons with mental health conditions. I mentioned I'd be getting to mental health before. This was, I think, a very crucial element of the two seminal reports that I mentioned. It's making sure that families of those with mental illness have a proper understanding of how to communicate with call takers at a 911 center, how to communicate with officers when they arrive at the scene of an incident with someone experiencing a mental health crisis, in hopes of minimizing any chance that there needs to be a use of force or other negative outcome from such an incident. The department has very much embraced this recommendation as well. They've been proactive in trying to educate families on how to effectively get call takers and get police officers the information they most need to know to be able to handle those situations. They've done education campaigns, they've done outreach trainings to different family members of the community. We're pleased to see that.
I think that's a very, very important component, and you say there have been outreach or what have you. How do you do outreach when you don't know who would fall in that category, and you know there are people that have special circumstances? So if you could just expand a little bit on how we are trying to deal with that mental health piece, that would enlighten me.
I have a small vision into it. My staff may have more, and if there are representatives from the department here, they may have more. Here's my small vision, is that the mechanisms can be things like checklists for family members to understand, here's when I make a call to 911 because my son or daughter is having an incident, here are the things I need to be sure to alert them to before they arrive here. Distributing in written form those checklists to family members is one way. Resource guides that include additional information as well of different services that are available to families of someone experiencing mental health illness are different ways as well. Inviting the community in. I don't think it's necessarily very hard to identify sometimes those community members, because the community members want to have positive relationships with their police department. They know they may have had challenging or negative experiences in the past when needing to call the department to their residence or to a location, and so they want to avoid that in the future, so they are very happy to reach out to the department in that fashion. If it's okay with you, I'd like just to ask if staff have any additional.
And is there anything that we can do on our end proactively, like asking, are there any special circumstance? So that's what I'm curious about.
I would just add that they've partnered with NAMI, a mental health organization, to do some of these meetings, and I think some other organizations as well. I'm not familiar with all the organizations, but I think that's been a priority to partner with these groups. One thing that council members may want to consider is having the documents, the resources available for community members so that they know what to expect when they call the police, how to communicate with call takers, et cetera. That may be something useful that you could do as well.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. And what I intended to close with is just a few areas where we've made recommendations that we're still hoping to see further progress on the part of the department. And there's just three of them I wanted to highlight. One is updating the manual and special orders and having those available to the public. The concept there is that barring any particularly safety-sensitive information that might cause harm to officers, all the rules that the department follows are public rules. They should be known to the public. The public has a responsibility and a right to understand what rules their police department is following. The department does have its manual online. There needs to be a little bit further updating of some of the special orders that come out to supplement the manual. We've been working with the department, but it's lagged behind just a little bit. The fortunate thing I can say about this recommendation is, as compared to some of the others, which are very long-lasting, which are sometimes never-ending goals for the department to strive for, this is a bit of a more low-hanging fruit, in our opinion. We'll continue working with them to make sure that they maintain their library of manual and special orders on the website for the public to see as up to date as possible. A second area is one that is a little bit more of a longer road to travel down, and that's rendering first aid after use of force. This goes along with the principle that the department espouses of reverence for human life and ensuring that even when the department gets involved in the use of force, they are prepared and interested in rendering aid insofar as it's possible. There are some roadblocks to this particular challenge. They include everything from financial resources to make sure that the first aid kits are available to all officers at all times, training to officers to make sure that they are able to use them properly and will do good and not harm, and also just discussions, I think, with the employee unions to make sure that they have a chance to air any concerns they have with regard to this role for their rank and file. So that's a little bit of a longer road, but I think it's an important one. It's one that the Board of Police Commissioners is particularly interested in as well. And so at the moment we are, I know there are discussions ongoing with the City Attorney's Office, with the unions, I believe. We are going to continue sort of closely, keeping a close eye on that because we think it's a positive direction for the department to move in. And I believe the final area I want to mention is the department's ability to measure and incentivize community policing or community interactions. I think the department does a very good job of dedicating resources and dedicating interest to the concept of true community policing and making sure the community is a partner with them. Our specific recommendation, again, coming out of those two national reports, was that they find ways to actually measure, track, and incentivize officers to participate in such activities going forward. One aspect to doing so, although not the only one, is finding a way to actually code those activities and record them in the department's CAD or computer-aided dispatch system. We are of the understanding that there is a new CAD system coming online which may make this more seamless and easy to do. And the last report that we heard is that the system may be coming online sort of early in 2019, somewhere around March of 2019. So it's something that we will continue, again, to keep an eye on. We hope that that new CAD system will be an easy way to achieve that goal. But we will also be patient as they bring that new system online that I think will help the department overall, including in this area. So just, again, wrapping up, in addition to the presentation we were able to make to you in March, where we went into a little more detail, happy to sort of answer questions in these areas or others, but the goal for us was to sort of be a watchful eye over the department as they try to live up to the standards set up by those two reports I mentioned. And overall, we see a lot of positive. We do see some areas where we're hoping for continued improvement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming and thank you for your work. Questions, members? Mr. Koretz?
Thank you, Mr. President. On a couple of the items you mentioned, certainly on the use of force, I know there have been occasions where people have been hit and perhaps shot appropriately, but then not given aid. Where are we in the interim of having those incidents and allowing someone to plead out on the street and coming up with these protocols and making sure everyone's trained? What do we do in the interim before all that training and all the steps are provided to make sure we don't hear about those things happening?
Yeah, I think sort of on a bit of an ad hoc basis, I think there are times when officers who are trained and feel equipped to do so may render aid. In addition, they are trained to call for medical assistance to scenes where there's been a serious injury after use of force, a rescue ambulance to travel to the scene and render the aid on behalf of the person who was injured. I think those are the methods in use right now. As I mentioned, the concerns, I think, with the first aid element is making sure that the proper training is given. Again, make sure there's not additional liability incurred by officers, and those are things that they're working out with the City Attorney's Office currently. The department may be able to speak even better to that as well, but let me see if my staff have other input. I'm not sure that's maybe an unsatisfactory answer. I'm not sure there's a lot more to it.
Well, if you are a random person and you happened upon the scene, you would probably make an attempt to render aid. So are we are we still in a position where we're less helpful than a random bystander who would make their best attempt to make sure that someone was bleeding, got a tourniquet, out of whatever clothing happened to be the most readily available, and make that effort?
Yeah, I don't know, and I suppose the answer, and the best of my knowledge, would be that we're maybe in the same position as that person. As an officer might be equipped and see, I can help this individual, that they would. If they aren't equipped to do so, or aren't capable, don't know how to do so, then they wouldn't, which may put them in the same position. Again, I want to be careful not to answer too much for the department on that area. Our recommendation deals with making sure that they get the proper training and equipment to do so, and we're hopeful that they will.
So currently, is every officer not given some basic first aid training?
I believe there is a state requirement for officers to receive updates on first aid training. We have looked at times to see if the department is in full compliance with that, and I don't have the answer right now if they are in full compliance with that training.
Does the department have an answer?
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the council. My name is Mike Himes. I'm the commanding officer of the Internal Affairs Group, and I'll try to answer that question the best I can. Currently, I'm actually here for item number 2. I don't believe we have a representative on this item. As far as responding and providing first aid in the case of a use of force or an emergency, I think Mr. Smith was accurate. At this point in time, it's on an ad hoc basis. I mean, some officers will do that. Other ones who have just been involved themselves in an exceptionally traumatic incident, it may be more difficult for them to respond. There's, in that respect, as Mr. Smith indicated, there are several steps that that we need to go through before we can mandate an officer who's just been involved in a critical incident, such as an officer-involved shooting, to actually take that step when all the other things that are still happening, just post-incident. So I mean, it is a goal that we're trying to get to, but I don't believe that we can mandate that at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. And one other question on the mental health end. Obviously, to the extent that we can identify family members that know that their relative has a mental health problem, and we can educate them on what to tell us, that's a good first step. And obviously, having the people that do the intake of those emergency calls, knowing all the things to ask for, is a logical second step. What else can we do on the actual scene? Because we've obviously had cases, and other police departments too, all over, where you have a bad situation, but the result of officers coming out and then being threatened with a gun or a knife make it worse rather than if they had never responded. And it's not necessarily a fault of the person responding, but how do we, once we have that information, or if we don't have that information, how do we respond in such a way that the person we're coming to help, we don't wind up having to shoot and kill, which does happen on occasion?
One crucial area is the department, I think, does fairly well in is with its mental evaluation unit, which is dedicated to making sure the department has some focus and resources to this particular area. One outgrowth of that is what they call SMART teams, where there are officers paired up with mental health professionals who have an understanding of crisis intervention training, who have an understanding possibly of the specific individuals who have had prior contacts with law enforcement, and who have an understanding of services that they can direct someone to when they're experiencing mental health crisis. So those teams are available. They act in concert with each other, again, a civilian from the mental health field with a sworn officer, and they can be called to those scenes to assist in the interactions between the police and the person experiencing mental health crisis. What I hope to see from the department, the more resources, the better. It's something that the county struggles with as well. They're trying to get more and more such teams for them, or the sheriff's department. I always think that more of these teams is better because the incidences of calls involving a mental health crisis is not going down as far as we know. The earlier that we can make the calls to those SMART teams, I think the better.
And they can obviously do some things to attempt to diffuse situations.
Correct.
But when it doesn't work and someone charges at an officer with a knife, do you have less than lethal weaponry that you deploy first, like a beanbag gun or a pepper spray gun or a taser? Do you have a series of those steps planned first, or do you have to just respond to a life and death situation that suddenly appears with an actual gunshot?
The short answer is yes, those resources are available and are in use, and a proper command and control of such a scene would account for both less lethal and lethal options, and would reserve the use of force of any type to keep it at the lowest level possible, lowest level necessary. And so when we evaluate, when our office reviews the department's uses of force, particularly their major uses of force, that's one of the things that we look for. Was there proper planning, proper equipment, including less lethal options available, proper direction from the supervisors on the scene to utilize less lethal whenever possible as opposed to lethal force. And so those are always things that I would say are under constant evaluation by the department itself and through review by our office.
I think if I may, one of the things that is very critical, and each incident is different, but it's a matter of time. If we can create additional time before that person rushes or does something, as part of de-escalation, as part of talking to the person, getting the resources there, being prepared for whatever may occur, that's an advantage that may help end in a nonviolent type of encounter. So time is very critical for us to be able to establish that. But if the officer just arrives and immediately is attacked, that would be a different situation.
One other element, the department also always looks to upgrade as much as possible its equipment and its weaponry, and that includes the less lethal weaponry. If they have seen that, for instance, a beanbag shotgun is not as effective and maybe causes more harm than it needs to, as opposed to another less lethal weapon, they will research and figure out maybe we should transition to this other weapon. Our office, fortunately, gets to be in on many of those decisions. We're consulted, we're showed the research, we can do our own research to compare, and so we're always mindful of that to see if there's any way to utilize this weaponry while maximizing effectiveness and minimizing harm. That's a balance that we always want to strike. We know the department does as well.
Great.
Okay,
Thank you.
good questions, Mr. Koretz. In fact, I'll say this to staff and to my staff in particular. When I hope for this committee to meet again before the end of the year, so maybe we could have a more detailed conversation on, us applying some kind of first aid and get more information on the mental health piece of this. So we'll put in an official request so that when we do meet before the year is out, we could get information on that, more detailed information from the proper division within LAPD. I also want to say I can remember when Mr. Marquise Harris Dawson, I think he had only been here a few months, and there was an incident it took us a while to figure out if it was in his district or my district. I think it was a matter of feet. There was a woman who had been trying to rob drugstores, and she was obviously had some mental issues, and she had a knife. And to this day, Mr. Harris Dawson and I can't understand why somebody just didn't hit her, and so I would like to get more information. I mean, she was kind of deranged. She had a knife. We had two guys. We just don't understand why it happened that way. But I appreciate you coming, and if you could stay around for a bit in case there's another question from a member a little later, I'd appreciate it.
Of course.
So I'd now like to we go to item 2, and if I could get Mr. Tufang to come up. Mr. Herman and Mr. Spindler, please do not come into the committee disrupting. So this is a warning. Please sit down. Please be quiet. You missed public comment. Okay?
Good morning, council members. I'm Josh
Morning.
Drake from the CLA's office, and with me is Richard T. Fink from the Police Commission.
Richard?
Morning.
Item 2 is a report from the CLA in response to a motion that was introduced when the council put Measure C on the ballot last year. This report covers a number of topics, including public hearings.
In fact, let me stop you for a minute. So on item 1, we'll note and file that, Mr. Clerk. Okay, go right ahead.
So the report covers a number of topics, including public hearings, the hearing examiner selection process and the police commission's role in that, liability issues within the department, a legal analysis from the city attorney's office on court cases that affect Board of Rights hearings and the accessibility of information from those hearings. And then there are a number of recommendations for your consideration from our office, including instructing the CLA to work with your office to identify suitable meeting locations for a roadshow similar to cannabis and other issues, reports on changes to report on what changes could be made to hearing examiner job requirements to make it more open, directing LAPD with the assistance of the city attorney to report on options to make anonymized reports on police disciplinary matters available to the public, and then recommendation to support or sponsor legislation to open up disciplinary hearings of police officers to the public.
You want to chime in?
Yes, Mr. President. Good morning. Richard T. Fink, Executive Director of the Board of Police Commissioners. I'd be happy to address any of the questions related to the current qualifications for minimum qualifications to be a member of the Board of Rights as a hearing examiner. I can also provide you with some of the current demographics of our hearing examiner pool and ways that I would recommend that we could look at expanding the pool to increase diversity, city residents, and to have more individuals available. With the current ordinance, with the passage of Measure C and the implementation of an ordinance, it'll be a requirement for 3 civilian hearing examiners to sit on a panel if an officer chooses that. Currently, it's 1. So we will need to increase our current pool, which is 37, by approximately 20, I believe, to get this off the ground, so we have a more larger pool to pull the names from. Currently, the way we pull the names is we draw 3 names from the pool anonymously, and then they're provided to the department and the individual officer. There's a coin flip. Whoever wins the coin flip strikes one name, the other party strikes the other name, and the individual that is remaining is selected as a hearing examiner. I would suggest that we would change our process to have 9 names that would be pulled, and you would do that process 3 times so that you would be able to have a larger pool of people to get involved in the process.
I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on how we diversify the panel or the pool.
Sure. Currently, the pool is made up of 37 individuals. There are 24 males and 13 females. Within that, in the males, there are 17 white, 4 black, 2 Hispanic, 1 Asian Pacific Islander. In the females, there are, as I said, 13 total, 10 white females, 1 black, 1 Hispanic, and 1 Asian Pacific Islander. One of the things that I would recommend that we would do to expand the diversity in that pool is we would, to increase the pool, would reach out to the various publications and organizations that represent minority communities in the city of Los Angeles to encourage individuals to apply for the position, do an aggressive recruitment campaign through the traditional city website, but then do the non-traditional means of, again, reaching out to organizations that represent members of the minority community, neighborhood councils, in that way to expand the information pool if this position is available and to encourage them to apply.
What are the requirements? What do you look for when you're selecting an individual to be part of?
The current requirements, which were adopted a number of years ago, and they are the minimum requirements, shall not have a criminal record that would impact the hearing examiner's candidate's ability to impartially act as a Board of Rights member, should have a responsible record of community service, shall not presently be employed as a full-time law enforcement officer, preferably a resident of the city of Los Angeles, shall have at least 7 years' experience with arbitration, mediation, or administrative hearings or comparable work experience, experience in human resources, labor, personnel relations, or employee discipline is preferred. And those are the current requirements. There are some areas that I think that we could expand in those requirements. And also, just again, as a point of information, of the 37 hearing examiners, 29 are current City of Los Angeles residents. One of the things that, again, I think that we could do to expand the pool would be to, as was mentioned earlier, consider the increase of retired law enforcement officers into the pool. That would be one way to increase the members of the pool and their requirements. Another piece could be to use the means of getting information out to the public, that the importance of the disciplinary process, and look at that 7 years of experience and reducing some of that experience time. So you're not eliminating individuals from the community who maybe have not had the 7 years experience in those areas that I described, but yet want to participate, understand the process of it's a fair hearing, it's an administrative process, and increasing our pool by reducing that requirement for 7 years of experience.
So it's a 7-year requirement?
7 years requirement for with arbitration, mediation, or administrative hearings, or comparable work and personnel or labor matters.
So what, and I can see that you're working on, trying to deal with the 7 years. I'm just curious as what's magical about the 7 years.
I can't answer that, so that's why I said I would consider reducing that 7 years. And I can't give you a number now what I think that would be. I think the 7 years is a number that I can't speak to. It was done long before I arrived here, but I don't think 7 years is a magical number. I think it's based on that individual's ability to explain and articulate what their experience has been in those variety of areas, their interest, and the other things that they bring to the table.
Because, just given the statistics that you rattled off as to the diversity of the panel, given the city of Los Angeles, that's not even, in my view, close to any type of balance. And I think going forward, we want to really try to balance that out and look at the loosening up of the 7 years. And I also would think we would look towards younger people as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree, sir.
Okay, members, any other questions for our panel of people that are here today? Okay, so we have some recommendations, Mr. Clerk. We want to enter those into the record. Would you like to maybe read those quickly? I think there are 4 recommendations moving forward.
Yes. Recommendation number 1 is to request the city attorney to prepare and present a draft ordinance implementing the provisions of Charter Amendment C. Recommendation number 2 is to request the police commission, with the assistance of the city attorney, to make changes to the qualifications for civilian hearing examiners that would include enhancing diversity, increasing the number of city residents, and allow for the inclusion of retired command staff police officer, e.g. command and above, which would require a minimum 1-year cooling off period for retired LAPD command staff. Recommendation number 3 is to request the city attorney to report back with the assistance of the CAO and LAPD with recommendations, budget needs, and an implementation plan to have the city attorney's office act as the department's advocate for all Board of Rights hearings. And the final recommendation, number 4, is to instruct LAPD with the assistance of the city attorney to report on options to make comprehensive anonymized reports on police disciplinary matters available to the public on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you for that. What I want to do is thank everybody that came today and the members. And on this issue, without objection, we'll adopt the recommendations of the chair. But I also want to quickly respond to something that was mentioned earlier by Ms. Ochoa. Then this committee has, and I believe you've been to all of our meetings, historically meets in the evening. And this hearing took place this morning just so that we could begin this process. So I make a commitment that the next hearing we have will again be in the evening, and we'll try to give as much advance notice as we can so that people from the area, people that are interested, will have the ability to come. So I took what you said under advisement, and we will definitely move forward in that direction. But I'm proud of the fact that the hearings on this subject we've tried to have at a time when we would provide more people an opportunity to arrive. So with that said, Mr. Clerk, is there any more business before this? Okay, then this committee's adjourned. Again, thank everybody for coming.